Good morning or good afternoon. This is Mark Lilly, and very happy you could make it to this webinar on rethinking managing production. This is the first part of a three-part series. I'm holding, it's been on a weekly basis now for the past 4 weeks or so, and this is part one, scheduling. The other two topics are material planning and costing that are held tomorrow and Thursday, respectively, at the same time. So if you're interested in either one of those topics, feel free to sign up to those webinars at this link below, or just get in touch with me or through our website, and happy to direct you and point you in the right direction. Well, let's get started on scheduling. So as a manufacturing professional, or I'm assuming you're someone who either is or works with manufacturing professionals, how many jobs or work orders are you managing at any one time through production? Right? Some small shops, maybe 10, somewhere between 10 and 50. You get to be a little bigger towards a medium shop, maybe 100, 500 jobs. And certainly some bigger plants, you're managing thousands or thousands potentially of work orders at any one time. Each of those work orders, right, has a series of steps, operations that need to be completed to get it done. And those vary wildly, right, even within the same company. So you might have jobs that have 3 or 4 steps, some that have 10 or a dozen, others that may have 20 or 30, right? Then comes the question, or really the added complexity, if you will, of potentially sub-assemblies. So are your jobs really just single level? You're taking a single material, moving it through a series of operations, maybe going outside once or twice, right, before it comes back in, other operations are done, it's shipped out the door. Or do you have sub-assemblies that are being built specifically for and in the same lot quantity as the current job you're making, right? Which is kind of the case here. I'm making 3 sub-assemblies that need to be done for this welding operation. Or maybe these are completely separate jobs and I'm making more of them in anticipation for not only this parent, but possibly multiple parents that are going to need this sub-assembly. So maybe you do a bit of both, right? You make this sub-assembly specific to that job, but others you make in advance or stock or that sort of thing. So this gets complex. Now this is just a single level of a sub-assembly, because it's really just three sub-assemblies at the same level that I need. You may have 4, 6, 10 or more levels of your bombs and routings, right? So it might actually look like this. And again, whether you're managing it, specifically for making these sub-assemblies specifically for the parent, or they've got to be made in advance, this is, a challenging task, right? So the fact is, each one of these work orders, whether you're managing 50 or 5,000 or anywhere in between, each one of them will have a due date on it, right? And that is, if you're make to order, that means that's a commitment to your customer as to when you're going to get that product out to them. If you're make to stock, that's a commitment to you internally as to when you're going to replenish inventory, so it's going to be available for when customers order it for immediate shipment, right? Or somewhere in between, maybe you're a combination of make to order or make to stock. But this is a daunting task. You have all these work orders, all these operations. They all have to go through a limited number of resources, machines, people, tooling perhaps, and maybe even have to go outside to heat treating or plating or anodizing, and then come back in and maybe go out again for something, right? So this is a hugely daunting task. So kudos to you for signing up for a career in manufacturing, right? So this is a very complex problem. Managing production is very difficult. It's hugely variable, lots of variability to it, and lots of, literally and figuratively, lots of moving parts. So it's really no wonder that most manufacturers struggle with managing all this and trying to get all of those work orders out on time, right? We're kind of trying to do it with whiteboards. You might be using spreadsheets. You might be struggling with kind of sophisticated or complex algorithms, computer tools, right? So, you know, why is there this struggle with, and if you're doing it, it's probably pretty obvious, you know it, but with kind of spreadsheets and whiteboards, well, they're time consuming, right? It takes a lot of time to maintain them, update the information. Things are changing all the time, like I said. So, like you know, so the priorities, it's really hard to stay up on top of those. So you're really just trying to establish what needs to be worked on right now, maybe even this week. And there's not much future visibility. It's hard to tell, well, do I have the capacity? Will I have the capacity to get all these work orders done, right? So if you're living this, you know that trying to manage scheduling is difficult using these manual methods. The tools you have in your ERP, if you have an ERP, you've likely got some sort of scheduling program in there. Maybe you have a bolt-on, advanced planning and scheduling or APS system to an ERP. The thing with any computer program, and you can actually look this up on Wikipedia, is the job shop scheduling problem. And the job shop scheduling problem simply says that it is so complex. Okay, I kind of spoke about the complexity of this issue we're trying to deal with. It is so complex that there really is no computer that's going to give you an optimal solution to your scheduling problem. And that's kind of what we've been led to expect from our ERP solutions, right? Is I'm going to put in my work orders, I'm going to put in my operations, my calendars, maybe even my people, I'm going to put in the times that the operations take, and it's going to spit out how I should sequence stuff, right? How I should schedule, right? Well, it's never going to give you the optimal solution. So I won't get into the details of why that is. Go, if you're interested, go read about it. It's just simply, very simply, it is just so complex that even the biggest computer would take probably hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years to compute the optimal solution for your production schedule. So what are ERP systems doing for us? What are they doing? Well, what they're doing is they're running a capacity loading algorithm that kind of simulates the way you might put things in a schedule based on, you know, forward scheduling or backward scheduling or finitely or infinitely. So it's kind of trying to look at your capacity and put the work, all the operations of each work order in there. And then you print out a dispatch list and you send that out to the shop, and the folks out there look at it and say, you know, where do you get the order of these operations, right? There's often, if you've tried this, I think you realize there's often a disconnect between what the folks in the shop probably know to be the true priorities from a production schedule app meeting versus what this computer program is trying to tell them, you know, is the right sequence or priority. So there's often that disconnect. That's what we hear. The fact is that in manufacturing, to kind of put it nicely, you know, stuff happens, right? There's you all probably live this every day, so you know that there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of things you might have an idea are going to happen, and there are things that are just completely unplanned that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So the idea is even if you were to come up with a good plan or a good schedule and then attempt to execute that, the reality is things change so much. Customers call, people don't show up, materials get lost, or so you're trying to deal with all this, and whatever plan you do come up with is often obsolete a few minutes after the program finishes. Right? So the symptoms we see, manufacturers struggling with scheduling often see lower on-time delivery percentage than they'd like, longer lead times than they'd want. They have a lot of work in process inventory. There's a lot of materials out there. Things kind of get clogged up. There's a lot of bottlenecks. Bottlenecks move maybe even on a daily basis. First it's this department, then it's that department, right? You may have one, even two people almost dedicated, certainly towards the end of the month, to expediting, right? Trying to push through those jobs that we do want to get out for revenue recognition purposes or to satisfy the customer who's screaming the loudest, right? Sales and customer service is often frustrated by this as well. Of course, they have customers calling them, asking when they're going to have their order. They don't have a good answer for them. So they tell them something, and then that turns out not to be true. So they have to go tell them something else after they get the egg off their face, right? So they can be frustrated. You may be losing new business because of this, maybe not winning as many quotes as you'd like, or even existing customers are threatening to go away. So these are real issues, and this all affects cash flow as well. So in terms of the financial impact and the financial health of the company. Okay. So how do we fix this? How do we and how are we suggesting we fix this scheduling issue? Well, we're going to fix it by actually not scheduling. So let me explain what I mean by that. Instead of scheduling, I want you to move back a little bit, and what we're going to do is focus on flow. Okay, let me explain what I mean by that. In 1975, a fellow named George Plossel wrote down his first law of manufacturing. Okay, kind of the most important thing that any manufacturing company should know and should be aware of. Ironically, Joe Orlicke, who literally wrote the book on MRP in 1975, used George's quote in his book. And I say ironically because at the end of the day, MRP and finite scheduling, what came out of it, it was a good attempt, but it kind of actually impeded the flow of manufacturers. So this first law simply says that all benefits in a manufacturing company will be directly related to the speed of flow of information and materials. So I think everybody would agree, I hope you would all agree, that the faster you can move materials through production, assuming the same or better quality, then there's going to be all sorts of benefits to that, right? So is this something that makes sense to you, right? If you're able to accelerate the movement of materials through production, will you see a lot of benefits from that? Okay. Now, information is important because if you can get the right information flowing to the right people in the right areas, then they can make the right decisions to speed the flow of material. Okay, and that's what we're after here. That's what we're going to go after. Okay. What does all benefits mean? Well, all benefits is huge. It takes that symptom sheet that we had, and now it turns it completely upside down. So the benefits of improving the speed of flow of materials, on-time delivery increases, lead times shrink, WIP reduces, expediting becomes an exception rather than the rule. Sales and customer service is happier because your performance is better. Customers are, for the most part, getting their product when they wanted it. Okay, they may even have visibility in the future now about when they're going to get an order, even if they're going to be late. They'll have some confidence as to when they can tell their customer the order will be coming out to them. Winning more business because of it, strengthening your existing relationships, and all this improves cash flow tremendously, greatly improving the overall health of your company. I want to emphasize what this is not, but what I'm not going to be talking about when I use the word flow, because it is a loaded term, I understand. I'm not going to be talking about lean one-piece flow, okay? I'm not going to be talking about cellular flow or value stream flow. I'm not going to ask you to change your shop layout, to change, get down to one-piece flow where you're drastically changing a batching method, or even do, deep process analysis across your value streams. These are all very, can be very potent and powerful concepts in the right area, but I'm not going to be talking about this today. This is not what I mean by flow or improving flow. Okay, and you'll see why in a moment. So instead, what I want to do is, again, I'm backing up a little bit, and I hopefully we agree that there are tremendous benefits by improving the speed of flow of material through the shop. Okay, I'm going to now introduce 3 principles that enable any manufacturer to do this, to improve the speed of flow. And I would also suggest that you kind of need to be doing all 3 of these together and not just any 1 or 2 in isolation. Okay, and I think you'll see why as I move along here as well. So the first idea is, if we're able to acknowledge, even anticipate that, quote unquote, stuff happens in manufacturing, then would that allow us to increase the speed of flow of material in our shop? Okay, so when I say anticipate, many of the scheduling tools, for example, and to give a almost extreme example, is you talk about backward scheduling, for example. So when a program is doing a backward schedule, you're basically telling the system, okay, let's plan to finish every work order, every job. Let's plan to finish the last operation of every job the day it's due, okay, or maybe the day before. Well, that's crazy, right? If you think about it that way, that's nuts. Why would you plan for the last operation? Stuff's going to happen, right, in between the due date and when you release that job. So why would you release it that tightly? We're actually planning to finish the last operation the day it's due. You want to anticipate variability because things are going to happen. You want to have that time protection there to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. Okay, even though you may not know exactly what that stuff is, but stuff is going to happen. That's the first principle. The second is, if we can control how much we're sending out into work in process, would this increase the speed of flow of material in the shop? Okay, we often see shops where there's this kind of quote unquote intuitive idea, right? The sooner we get material out there, the sooner it's going to come out as finished product, right? Well, not exactly. There's this concept called Little's Law, which very simply says, it's from mathematical Q theory, and it says the more things or people or items you put into a system, and a system in Q theory could be a highway, for example, right? The more cars that are going onto a highway, the longer period of time any one of those cars is going to be on a particular stretch of highway, right? So think about it. You're coming down that on ramp, right? All you see is red lights. It's 4 or 5 lane highway. You're going to be on that stretch of highway for a lot longer than if everybody's whizzing by you as you come on the highway at 70, 75 miles an hour, right? And there are fewer cars. Okay. Another example, you go to an amusement park on, well, let's say pre-COVID days, on spring break, right? You have a list of 5 rides you want to go on. You're going to be at that amusement park a lot longer because there's a lot more people there at spring break, again, pre-COVID, sorry, than if you're able to go, say, in 3rd week in September when everybody's back in school, right? The same principle applies in a manufacturing shop floor. The more jobs you send out into work in process, the more material you send out, the longer period of time any one of those jobs is going to be in work in process. The neat part about this is that the inverse holds true as well. The fewer jobs I send out into WIP, the faster any one of those jobs is going to flow through all of its resources, all its operation steps to get done. Okay. Now there's a balance point, obviously. We don't want to send too little that we're starving WIP and people don't have anything to do, obviously. So there's a balance point. We don't want to send out too little. We don't want to send out too much though either. Okay. And one of the reasons people, one of the big reasons people send kind of too much out or send it out is they don't have the visibility of the right time to start a job. So if you think about it, that certainly if I were in production and I couldn't see, or I didn't know objectively when the right time to start a job is, then I'm probably going to send material out early, maybe really early, just to cover my butt, right? So I think that's one of the symptoms we see and why many manufacturers have much more WIP out in much more inventory or material out in WIP than they could have. Okay? So there's an opportunity for most to improve that. And that's principle number 2. We're going to help with that. The third concept is around prioritization. So one of the things folks struggle with is kind of like I just mentioned, well, when do I start a job? When is the right time to send, whether I have material or, when I get material or if I have it in inventory, when's the right time to start that job, right? And then once it is in process and I have multiple jobs at a particular work center, how do I decide which job to work on next? What truly is the priority? Well, pretty much every system out there, every scheduling tool, is going to tell you, well, due date. You just look at the due date, and that's the way you should prioritize. Well, is it really? If you're in a high mix environment, and most manufacturing companies are today, that means that high mix means that you're going to have jobs that are due 8 weeks from now, right? That because they have more operations or longer operations, or maybe they have to go outside and back 2 times, right? They're more in danger of being late if you don't get started on it today than a job that's due just a week from now, right? So this is what due date is causing. Due date will actually, if you're prioritizing by due date, will actually focus you on these earlier jobs at the expense of the later jobs that are actually becoming more and more in danger of being late because you're not paying attention to it, right? You don't have that visibility of when you should be paying attention to it versus the jobs that are due earlier, okay? So the right priority will show you this, and that's the third principle. This is the third thing we're going to help you with, okay? Those are the 3 principles. Let's see how they work in action. Okay. So what we're going to do is, and I'm going to assume that you have an ERP system today and that you have work orders and routings in that ERP system. If you don't, that's okay. We have places in our software where you can set those up. You can set up templates and create work orders and routings in our software as well. But again, I'm going to assume you already have that in an ERP for purposes of this conversation. So we're going to import that information. We're going to import work order header information. That includes the job number, the part number, the due date, whether it's released or in planning, and certainly the quantity you're making. We're also going to import operation level details, such as which work center it needs to go through, the estimated setup and run times for each operation step. Now, a lot of folks get hung up because, and it's true in a finite scheduling type of program in your ERP or outside, these times need to be super accurate. They need to be 90–95% accurate. Why? Because those times are what actually builds your schedule. So they better be accurate if you want a schedule that looks somewhat like reality, right? In our software, it's less important. It's nice to have accurate setup and run times, but it's less important that they're super accurate, and you'll see why I say that in a moment, okay? So we're going to import this information. You could give it to us today in a spreadsheet. I could import it into our system, and we could show you what this whole looks like. Once you're in production, you may want to do a direct integration to your database. We connect into any ERP system especially SQL-based ERP systems, SQL Server, Oracle, what have you, and do a direct integration. So we're pulling your information out in real time as it changes, right? As new work orders are put in, or as existing work orders change, or as customers change due dates, right? So that can be a full reload or net change on a daily or a couple times a day, or it can be automatic scheduled net change updates every few minutes. Okay, so we're going to integrate directly with your ERP, pull that information over on a daily or multiple times per day basis. Okay, when it comes over, this is what it looks like. So, and this is how we address the first principle of anticipating variability. So when it comes over, here's the due date, comes over from the ERP. Here's the 4 operation steps that I pulled over. And again, the width of these is going to be determined by quantity being produced times whatever setup and run times you've got here. So that'll be kind of so this is a job that's going to take me 2 days of solid production time, right? So kind of as I described with backward scheduling, and I think you understand, if I were to release this job on Monday afternoon, I'd kind of be crazy to expect that all these operations are going to get done in perfect sequence by the due date on Wednesday afternoon, right? So I know there's going to be contention between other jobs, between operations. There might be stuff going on during operations. So I need some time protection here. I need a buffer to protect my due date, right? So what happens is when this information comes in from your ERP in real time, we create what's called a custom execution plan specific to every job, okay? The due date is the anchor point for it. We back off the buffer, and this is also dynamically assigned and sized based upon certain values or parameters, okay? So you're in complete control at a job by job level, part by part, or part family level about how big this and how much time you're allocating for the buffer, okay? So, and then there's the work. So the buffer is separate from the work that needs to be done. So as a result of putting this together, we also have, it's called over here, a release point. Now, this is kind of an objective point, and it's a really good time to start the job, right? So if we've agreed that the time protection here is going to make us comfortable that we can get these 4 operations done by the due date, then really why the need to send work out and material out any sooner than this particular date, right? So if we're controlling that across all my work orders, then I'm likely to, and most of our customers do, have an initial significant drop in the amount of work in process that they see. So over a few week period, 6 to 8 week period, many companies will see their WIP drop at least 20%, sometimes up to 30 or even 40%. Okay, so that drop in WIP now enables much better flow as well. Okay, so we're anticipating variability with time protection. That's protecting our due date. And with this edge of the execution plan, we're managing the overall WIP volume across all work orders for WIP in general, okay, by controlling and managing when is the right time to send work out into production. Okay, those are the first 2 principles covered right there with the custom execution plan that's created for every job as it comes through in the ERP. Let's talk about priority. So this is the same looking job, only what I've got here is there's the due date, there's that release date, and now by default we're going to look also to the ERP for completed operation status. Okay, so again, if you don't have an ERP, you can do that in our software. But if you do have an ERP and you're already doing it, then we'll just bring that information over. So this job has operation 10 and half of 20 reported complete. Today is right here. It's my due date, right? But today is right here. So the remaining work looks like that. This is the other half of operation 20, 30, and 40 still have to be done, okay? So here's the work remaining. And then from here to the end of my time protection, or the end of my buffer, is that time protection that remains. So what we do to prioritize work is we do a calculation in real time and at all times. We take the percentage of the work remaining and we divide it by the percentage of time protection still left, okay? That gives us what's called the threat level priority. So the idea is, if I'm doing work faster than my time protection is being eaten up simply by the passage of time, then my threat level is going to go lower and lower. On the other hand, if my time protection is getting eaten, right, my buffer is getting eaten by time going by faster than I'm reporting the work complete, then the threat level for this job is going to go higher and higher, okay? So we make that calculation and publish it out on the floor. Remember, the information, the flow of information, it's got to go out to where people can make the right decisions to speed that flow of material. So these priorities are published out on the shop floor by department, by work center, can be by person, by machine, if you want to get down to that level of granularity. I could see all jobs or all operations through all resources, or just through this particular department. Here are all the jobs that are coming through. And by default, they're going to be sorted by this, what we call the threat level status. Okay. Is it red? Is it in danger of being late? Is it moderately in danger of being late? Or am I okay? Okay. It's going to be sorted by whichever job, regardless of the due date, is most in danger of being late. Okay. And that's how we address these three principles to improve the speed of flow of material through the shop. We also have a view to see, we saw how we can see how one job is progressing, right, based on its execution plan, where it is now, okay? I can also see that across all my jobs using the production heat map. Now this is going to show me all 50, 500, 5,000 jobs that are released in production right now, however many you have. Now each circle represents a job or a group of jobs, could be 2 or 3, or over here I've got 26, in that threat level area. So ideally I'd want all my jobs walking up this green zone where roughly work's getting reported complete as time goes by. These jobs over here in the blue zone were released too early. The buffer hasn't even started and I've reported almost half the work complete on some of them. That may not be a problem unless I'm sharing resources, which is probably making some of these jobs late or in danger of being late. Okay. So I can click on any one of these, drill down into it specifically, and see exactly where that is and what's happening with it. Then comes the future-looking question. So up to this point, all we've talked about is pulling your information from the ERP system, in real time creating that execution plan with the buffer, and also in real time calculating the threat level based upon the percentage of work remaining divided by the percentage of time protection remaining. That threat level is published in real time out in the shop floor. So we always have visibility of which job, shop-wide or specific to any department, is the most important to be working on right now. Okay. Now we want to look out into the future and say, okay, that's all well and good, but where are my jobs predicted to finish out in the future? Okay. And that's where we use a program. Okay, so the other one doesn't use a scheduling program at all. I simply pull that information from the ERP and all that's calculated in real time. We do have a program called the Predictor, and all it does is it simulates you using this threat level priority into the future for all of your jobs. And it then shows you where every operation on every job is predicted to start and finish in its associated resource, okay, based upon what its threat level status will be in the future. Okay, so to give you an example, remember this job again. So here I've got operation 10 and half of 20 reported complete. I still have the other half of 20, 30, and 40 left to go. So theoretically, I could get this job done, you know, by Thursday afternoon, right? But I've got a lot of other jobs out there. I've got potentially hundreds of other jobs out there that are going to be competing for the machines or resources that are needed for these operations. So based upon all the other work that I've got out in the shop, this is actually when each of the remaining operations is predicted to start and finish based upon all the other work that will be going on out in the shop. So this is actually predicted to finish 2 days late, in spite of the fact that theoretically I could get it done much sooner. Okay. So when you run this program and it does its simulation, you can bring up the results of that simulation, and it looks like this. So you have to be careful here because this kind of looks like a schedule, right? But no, I'm not going to take this information and go print dispatch lists and send it out and say, go try to execute that schedule. I'm done with that. I already have my real-time priorities, so everybody knows which job is most important to be worked on at any one time. But what this does show me is some really useful information. It's done my simulation, and the simulation is done exactly how I will be executing my jobs based upon that threat level priority. So it's truly reflective of how production will flow in the future using this method. It's going to show me where my bottlenecks will be in the future. And then I can highlight any one of these operations. It will then highlight all of the operations in the particular work order it's tied to, bring up the execution plan for that job, and show me exactly where, when, and how each of the operations is predicted to start and finish based upon all the other work that's going to be going on in the shop in the future. This is how you can call your customer and with confidence, even if you're going to be late, customers, what we've heard from our clients using this is that they're really appreciative, folks being proactive and saying, we're going to be a few days late on this, but you will have it, you know, on the 16th. And oftentimes what we've heard is their customer will say, gee, I really appreciate you calling me and telling me that, you know, in reality, we're good. You can, you know, if you send it out on the 23rd, that would be great. Right. Okay. So how best to manage production? Well, it's critical we're able to answer these questions, right? Applying these 3 principles and answering the questions that we've looked to scheduling to answer for us for so long. Really, which job should I be working on right now? Shop-wide or in any work center? Where is the job? How is it progressing? Or all my jobs? And then how can I tell my customer with some level of confidence when they're going to be able to get their order? By the way, we do have, I haven't highlighted it here in the slide, but if you go to our website, lilyworks.com, and you look up on the main menu, there's success stories. You'll see a couple success stories there. And honestly, click on either one where it says read the story or read more. And it'll go into a video, and there are 2 customer testimonials there. And both of these customers were in a situation when they first implemented protected flow where they knew they were behind the 8 ball. They knew they had a capacity problem. They knew they had late orders, and they were going to have late orders in the future. So they talk about how protected flow helped them get out of that hole and get them to the point where there wasn't as much lateness anymore, and they could be, and they were really proactive with their customers in managing that situation. We talked about the 3 operational improvements or 3 operational concepts, principles that need to be applied to truly improve the speed of flow of material through our shop. So acknowledging, even anticipating that stuff happens in manufacturing, right? Anticipating that variability. Controlling how much and how many jobs go into WIP so that whatever is in WIP per Little's law, right? That whatever is in WIP is going to be able to flow more quickly and spend less time in WIP, okay? And then finally, let's use a better priority than due date. But due date's incredibly important. That's our commitment to our customer. But it's a very poor priority mechanism, especially if you're in a high mix environment. Okay. So applying these principles, being able to answer these questions is really what's going to help you with production, getting your jobs out on time and moving things more quickly. This software, by the way, is completely up in the cloud. You don't need any infrastructure on site to use it other than whatever clients you want to use to get on the web. Those can be desktops, laptops, tablets, your iPhone, a TV monitor for the priorities out in the shop, or multiple, however you want to do that. So essentially you have, complete and remote access to all your production information as well. As I mentioned, we talked about up front, all the benefits to improving the speed of flow of materials. It's a lot, And it's hard to believe, but if you watch those videos, talk to our customers, it's pretty dramatic that applying these principles, using that threat level information to control when you send work out, and once it's out there, prioritizing it in the right way, it's going to really improve the speed of flow of your production and give you these benefits. With that, happy to open it up to some questions. Actually, I'm going to pop a handout out there as well. Just a brochure on PFM and on the back of the brochure, it shows some of the graphics that I reviewed in the presentation as well. So let me grab that. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, certainly you can drop them in either the chat or I think there's a question section as well. I see one question there, so I will get to that in a moment. Once I go to the handouts, and I'm going to upload a handout so you all have that. And it's called PFM, Time is Money. So that's uploading, and it's at 25%. So let me take a look at this question. Questions, let me pop this open. What is the rough percentage of buffer to production time? Great question. That's up to you, frankly. So the way to, and it's a great question and a great conversation. And the way I like to start it is to ask you what your current situation is, meaning two questions. What's your standard lead time, right? Or what is the lead time for an average type of job, right? So you may say, well, I'm all over the place, Mark, right? I have jobs that just take a week to get out. I have jobs that take 2 months, et cetera. What's an average one? Many manufacturers, kind of an average type of job is 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. So let's say 6 weeks. So on that typical 6-week job, the next question then is, okay, if nothing else were in the shop, all the people, all the machines, all your work centers are standing at the ready, there were no other jobs, it was just this job you say has a 6-week lead time, what would be the actual touch time, right? How long would it actually take you to manufacture that if the whole shop were just focused on getting that job done, right? What we hear is the actual touch time ratio, right, to the lead time is pretty small. So on a 6-week job, the actual touch time is often, maybe it's 2 weeks if it has to go outside. If it doesn't, maybe it's a few days. Sometimes it's, a day or less, right? So the idea is, and the realization then is, well, wow, I'm using a significant buffer today, right? Based upon what my total estimated setup and run times are, right? Even if I'm not sure of those times, I know that ratio of buffer time that I'm using today when I quote a lead time versus how long it actually takes me to produce this part is significant. So the way we like to start out is to say, well, let's, if we feel comfortable, number one, you can just use that same time. So I could use, I could make the buffer size so that the entire length of that execution plan is 6 weeks. But what I'd prefer to do is say, well, if most of that is buffer anyways, right? If 80 to 90% of that 6 weeks is early buffer time, shouldn't we be confident if I can control how much goes into WIP and I know the right priority to work on jobs and I have full visibility of when jobs will need to be worked on, shouldn't I feel comfortable bringing that down to maybe 5 weeks just to start, right? So then if I had so to answer your question, I might want to say, on a job that takes, let's say, 3 or 4 days to produce, I might want to just put in like 4 weeks of buffer time for that. Okay. From a technical standpoint, buffers are automatically calculated and assigned. So we work with you to set that up. There's a number of different ways to set that up. It can be a fixed amount of time. It can be a percentage of the production time. It can be a combination of those two. We also get into the situation called build a buffer, where you actually can start with a base amount of time, and then you look to the work center master for each of the work centers that this job is going to go through, and add a certain number of hours or days to the buffer. So you're kind of building a custom size buffer specific to this routing that this job is going to go through. Okay. Hopefully that answers it. I might have gone too deep, but that should answer your question on that. The brochure is up. PFM time is money. Certainly feel free to bring that down, take a look at that. Again, especially page 2, it's going to show you very graphically the answers to those 4 production questions we talked about. So it's a nice brochure from that standpoint. It's very visual. Any other questions? One more from Lawrence. Is the buffer determined at the time of PO agreement? That's up to you. So there's actually, we could talk about that. So when you say PO agreement, I'm assuming that's the PO with your customer and getting a confirmed sales order in, right? So sales order is, different from the work order. Yep. Purchase order. So is that your purchase order from your customer, I'm assuming? Let me know if that's something different. So I'm assuming you're asking, okay, thanks. So yeah, you're asking when you get a confirmed sales order, when do you determine the buffer? Again, that's kind of up to you, but yeah, typically at that point, somebody has quoted a lead time, right? So, and by the way, simply by the fact that if I'm telling you, you're quoting a 6-week lead time to your customer, for example, and I'm telling you, well, you can bring that execution plan down. So really, you've just got a 5-week lead time in production. So you're not going to release work until, maybe 5 weeks before the due date. That doesn't mean that you have to tell your customer that you have a 5-week lead time, right? That's up to you whether you want to pass that along. You're just kind of even increasing the amount of buffer, so to speak, for yourself. Now the neat part about this is maybe that reveals by sending less out into WIP, you're likely to have a little bit of slack time out there, and maybe you're able to take some expedite jobs from your customer, charge some expedite fees, right, to get certain jobs out even very quickly. So it does lend the opportunity in that regard. We found that from some of our customers. But so the buffer time can be determined even at the quoting level. If you want, when you're quoting a job, you can create an execution plan for this item that you're quoting, right, to determine when you want to, what you want to establish as a buffer. And then even, again, once it becomes an order and you actually are putting it into production, it's flexible enough if you wanted to change the buffer for whatever reason, either add to it or shrink it down somewhat, then you could do that as well. So you have complete control over the size of the buffer by job and what you do with it and when you do that. So hopefully that answered your question. All right. See, not seeing any more questions, but those were certainly some good ones from Lawrence. I want to thank you for that. Thank you all for attending. I have recorded this. I will send out a recording probably in a few days, few days. So feel free to watch it again or share it with colleagues if you're so interested. And I do have a brief survey after the fact here. Would love it if you filled that out. Very simply, if you're interested in learning more, can either do a one-on-one with you and or take some of your information, set of your work orders and bring it in and show this tool to you, how it would work in your production environment. So that's really all the survey is about as to whether or not you'd like to pursue that type of thing. Thanks very much, everyone, for attending, and hope you have a great day.